Hello, everyone. My name is Isabel Geisler, and I am a PhD student at Northeastern University. I serve Fair Trade Campaigns as the Northeast Regional Fellow, and I am delighted to welcome you to the second breakout session of the day, #Activism, Innovations Advancing Digital Advocacy. I've been looking forward to moderating this session, and I am looking forward to hearing everything that the panelists have to say. Before we jump into it, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. And I hope this session can bring some hope to our chaotic march. First, we will have Laura Alexander Wittig, who after leading several social impact search initiatives for Google, scaling Amazon.com's fashion business, igniting Sephora's Beauty Insider community, creating products for Adobe and more, Laura was driven to create Brightly to catalyze change. She is a technical and design-focused leader with experience managing teams of all sizes and disciplines, from engineers to marketers. After Laura, we will have Manpreet Kalra. Manpreet Kalra is a digital marketing expert and social activist. She currently serves on the board of NYC Fair Trade Coalition, a grassroots fair trade advocacy organization. She's an advocate for fostering cultural humility and sustainable thought through inclusive brand narratives. With a background in venture and startups, she uses her knowledge to help businesses think of creative ways to grow and expand their influence. She brings a wealth of experience from her work with impact-driven businesses globally. Jay Godfrey, who is the Senior Director of Customer Success at NationBuilder. He manages a team that serves thousands of nonprofits, political campaigns and parties, advocacy organizations, and other movements around the world. Jay started his career in the world of trade associations and politics, but he found his calling in 2013 when he discovered NationBuilder, where he has spent over 6 years helping leaders of organizations, both large and small, learn to use technology to drive change. Jay is a fierce believer in the idea that technology is meant to amplify the work of humans, not to replace it, and loves nothing more than finding a new solution to an old problem. He never expected to end up at a technology company, but is driven every day by this unique opportunity to help others use software and organizing principles to realize their potential to lead and make a difference in their communities. And Sarah McCord. Sarah McCord is the Senior Director, Enterprise Sales at NationBuilder, managing a team of account executives that work to bring the tools of digital organizing to all nonprofits, political campaigns, and parties, advocacy organizations, and other global movements. Throughout her career, Sarah has managed sales teams in a wide variety of industries, from fashion to telecom, but landed at NationBuilder in 2017, when she discovered the mission-driven company at the unique confluence of technology and political advocacy. Please note that I'll be posting the Twitter handles of all of our speakers in the discussion box. So I encourage you to give them all a follow and share about this experience on social media, the discussion boards hosted on this website, or anywhere else. You'll see we have a question box. Please send in questions. We'll be sure to answer each one at the end of each panelist, as well as if we have time at the very end, we will go and have a final round of questions. In addition, I'd like to encourage you all to answer our poll so we can have an idea later of how many people were watching the stream. Please note that when you're answering the poll, what you'll need to do is you'll need to type in the O-N-E, right? Because it won't take more than one character, less than one character. All right, so now without any further delay, I'm excited to hand off this session to Laura Alexander Wittig.
Thank you, Isabel. So sorry for the last minute change, but it's actually I'm Laura's co-founder, Liza, and I'm the CMO and co-founder of Brightly. Laura handed off the session to me, and primarily because I do have more experience with online community building, and quite honestly, that's my has been my passion. I have been previously with Globin. Hopefully some of you might know this. It's a subscription box. It's a fair trade subscription box full of artisan handmade products from around the world. I helped grow Globin from $0 to $12 million in revenue and more than 10,000 subscribers. But again, the most proud thing I've done with Globin is create really passionate community of customers who we call mavens. So without further ado, I'll give you an introduction to Brightly, what we are doing. Brightly is actually part of the Yellow Accelerator by Snapchat right now. Plan was to be full-time in LA at Snapchat's office, but of course plan changed. So we are back home here in San Francisco Bay Area. So let me start. I'll briefly introduce you to Brightly, but the main chunk of my conversation I'd like to spend on how to build online communities, whether for your brand or for a movement or for a cause that you're passionate about. All right, everyone can see my slides, right? We're good? All right, I'm gonna start. All right, why is it? Okay, yep, we went through. So Brightly is trying to solve the problem. And the problem is that people want to support products and companies who are making things ethically, but there's no central one place to find sustainable goods and the stories behind them. I'm sure all of us would agree that sustainability is not a niche anymore. It's a very much a movement, and it's a movement led by very big companies, of course, with the poster child as a company as a Patagonia. There is more and more information every year about sustainability and ethical brands out there. But again, there's no one place where we can all go and trust in the resources that this place is providing. Brightly.eco is a new platform that features content, community, and brand recommendations that ignite change by conscious consumerism. And community is the part that I will be talking about today. We also have a podcast. The podcast is called Good Together. If you guys are into listening to podcasts there, which I didn't know until recently, but Good Together podcast focuses on all things sustainable and eco-friendly lifestyles. If you're curious about zero waste, what is circular economy, in each of the 30 to 50 minutes episode, me and Laura discuss specific topics surrounding sustainability. How can you reduce your food waste? How to shop more ethically during Black Friday and Cyber Monday? How can you celebrate Valentine's Day more sustainably? Or maybe even things like how do you keep your sustainable, eco-friendly lifestyle during this kind of new situation, new reality we are living in today. Brightly's Good Together podcast, our podcast, we were fortunate enough to be featured by Apple on their homepage, and we got into 150 top podcasts in the US just under 10 episodes. And ultimately, our goal with Brightly is to inspire billions of people to take small steps towards sustainability rather having, thousands of people living fully zero waste lifestyle. If you guys want to check us out, there is a link for you. Otherwise, on to the next slide. So yeah, let's talk about community, and feel free to ask me any questions, even if I go through my slides. I'm calling it Community Building 101, but I'll try and go into more details and more examples in every slide I'm talking through. And we'll have 5 to 10 minutes left for Q&A in the end. I'm happy, and I'd always love and encourage my audience to ask me questions, specific questions. Maybe it's for your brand, for your business, or for a cause or a student group you are trying to build a community around. Happy to kind of start getting ideas for you. So first of all, and I think it's kind of more marketing 101 for me, community and marketing for me personally, it's about your customer and audience and what they are interested in. It's not what your brand is about, and it's not about sales. I think you guys are probably, everyone is aware how that, small and local businesses, especially brick and mortar store businesses, are struggling right now during this coronavirus situation, especially in places like San Francisco, where We have a shelter-in-place mandate. Local businesses are closing down. And I think now we're realizing the importance of how important it is to build resilient businesses, how important it is to find multiple ways to connect with your community. Even if you're a brick and mortar store, you should always have ways to connect with your community. And if you give back to your community, if you listen to your customers, they will come through and they will support you during these difficult times, such as now. So for community, what I mean about, that community is about customer and not about you. It's just like anywhere you start the community with, you're starting your marketing with, talk to your customer, get on the phone with them, email them, poll them if you already have a community, ask what they care about. You should know your customer and community in and out, where they're hanging out in, what are their interests, what journals they're reading, which shows they're watching, things like that. But for this part, I think the main kind of outcome of knowing who your community is, you should know where your community is, quote unquote, hanging out, and especially in terms of different social media platforms. If your community and audience is a bit older, maybe that's Facebook, right? And then if we're going on all the way to their younger side, to Gen Z, people in college right now, probably like some of you guys are, that can be TikTok or Snapchat. So you have and you should be building community where they already exist, where they're already talking to each other. And you as a brand, as a marketer, as a movement leader, you should know the answer to that question. All right, let me move on to the next slide. Community building 101 continued. So this is kind of general rule of thumb for social media in general, is that, your social media post, same for your online community, is about 80% engagement and 20% sales. So you should start selling only after you have built a high engagement community. Here, I'd like to give you a specific example. As I briefly mentioned, I was previously with Globin, Globein. It's a fair trade subscription box. And what I've done there, I've started a Facebook group about 3 years ago, actually. I looked at it recently, and it has now 9,000 members, and I'll give you a screenshot of a few of their posts. And the reason why I started that Facebook group is, first of all, of course, even 3 years ago, organic engagement on social channels, especially on Facebook, was going down. But inside the groups, organic engagement was really high and still relatively high today. But on the other end, I was looking for true, meaningful, real ways to how can I connect with our customers in a very organic and authentic way. As you know, like even on social media, as a brand, we're just posting things and we're talking at people. We're talking at our community. We're not talking with them. We're not necessarily listening to them as much, even though we should be doing that. We should be reading all of their posts and answering their questions through social channels and any other channel they're sending you their questions through. But the reason I started the Facebook group and the reason that it ultimately became really successful and became core part of the business was because I started the Facebook group, started this community for community's sake. I did not start the group because I wanted more sales. And ultimately, this main kind of reason for living, or reason for existence for this community, helped me build the content and make sure that the content is organic and authentic. Because if I start this community just to push sales through, my organic engagement in the Facebook group would have been pretty low. And I'll give you a few more examples in the later slides, and hopefully it makes sense what I mean here. But I think with examples and screenshots, I can go a bit deeper into explaining what exactly is happening there. This is also kind of social media tip. With any marketing tip is about consistency. It's timing of posts and quality of content. It's very, very easy to see if you with social media, with marketing, with community building, you need to set expectations with your community. And the expectations are that I post every morning, every day, or I go and do Facebook Live inside my Facebook group every Thursday. Or I reply to all of the comments and questions at the community almost right away. Because if you don't do that, people won't be encouraged to ask questions. You know what I mean? If they engage with your content, they answer your questions, they comment, and you don't engage back with them, there's no reason for them to think, maybe if I come back next time and I comment next time, this brand or this founder will reply back to them. That doesn't work this way. And consistency is, again, every same time of day, every day, or maybe you're only posting a few times a week. This is up to you, but it's important to be consistent. And through multiple Facebook groups that I've led over the course of a few years, and, other organic social channels, the minute you kind of take a break from social media, it takes a break from you, and it's very hard to start at the same level of engagement. You have to almost build everything up from scratch. So it's very, very important. And in terms of content, quality over quantity, it's always, I think, the case with social media and with community. In general, with social media, it's all about algorithms, and even inside of Facebook groups, still algorithms. Algorithm is king, so you will be punished by algorithm for low quality content. General rule of thumb: if you should be as a social media marketer, as a brand founder, as an organizer, you should know exactly what type of content your community wants, and that's why it's so important to be reading everyone's questions, answers, comments, feedback, reading the analytics really well as well, and you should know what works best. You should be able even to predict what type of content your community will want to see more of. And when in doubt, just ask your community, make a quick poll. Just ask a super easy question. Do you like this or not? So always be engaging and asking your community. And I think one of the main reasons is that we human beings will love to be heard. We love when our opinions are valued and respected. So always never be shy of asking questions from your community and getting feedback from them. Very easy tip, does really work. Ask simple questions. I like to call them yay or nay type of posts. You probably, if you have been doing a little bit on social media, either engaging there yourself or you have been following other brands, a lot of times you get much higher engagement if you ask yes or no or yay or nay type of question. Or, for example, if we're talking about Facebook, the polls, will get 20, 30, or 100 responses versus your image or a post with a longer copy will get only like 5 comments, 5 likes. And the reason is that, again, we are bombarded with information. We're busy. We're always ready to keep scrolling to the next new thing. So the easier you make for your community, for your movement, for your customers to engage with you, whether it's a Facebook group, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere, you, as a marketer, as a brand founder, you have to make it as easy as possible for your community to do whatever you want them to do. So make it simple, and it does truly work. Yes, I've mentioned that probably in every single slide, but encourage conversations and reply to every single comment right away. I've been running Facebook pages and Instagram pages for probably, I don't know, almost like 8 years or so. And it's always extremely hard to start a community from scratch, start a Facebook page from scratch, Instagram account, but everyone, even Patagonia started from 0 followers, 0 members of the group, 0 emails, and that's fine as long as you keep at it, as long as you're consistent. But here again, if you're posting something, you will have 1 like, 2 likes, 10 likes, maybe 0 comments, maybe 2 comments later, 5 comments. but you have to reply to every single comment, every single like. And in terms of comments, keep encouraging questions. If somebody's, you are welcoming new members to your group or to your customers, and they said, thank you, I'm glad to be here, ask them, where are they tuning in from? Where did they find us? And things like that. And this will encourage more engagement. And again, algorithms are watching this. So not only your community will appreciate it, but algorithms will keep track of this engagement too. Right. And yes, community is a long-term brand building strategy. It's not a quick growth strategy. It's not a growth hack. So do not expect quick results, unless, of course, you already have, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 newsletter subscribers. You will have an easier time of building a Facebook community just by notifying your newsletter subscribers that here we have a new Facebook group, join us there. Building anything from scratch is tough. It does take time, but it's absolutely worth it. All right. I'm just checking my own time. Yeah, I think I'm almost done with the slides, and then I'll give you a few more specific examples with screenshots of one of my favorite online communities out there. In terms of Facebook groups or anywhere else, email is still very much a king in terms of marketing outlets. And so if you, for example, have a secret closed Facebook group, definitely make sure you're collecting people's emails, so that, again, you have other ways to connect with your community. For example, brands, movements, companies, they always think about, where do I build a community? Do I want to build a community where my customer and audience is, or do I want to build a community on my own website and have everybody come there? It's very difficult to do the latter, right? And that's why, it's much easier to build a Facebook group there. But what if Facebook or Instagram or TikTok shuts down next day and you have thousands of members there? You want to make sure that you have some of the information that you can continue the conversation with them. And this is why, even if it's your brick and mortar store, you should be collecting people's emails, your customers' emails as much as possible. Yeah, so another resource I have for you, I have done multiple Facebook Lives talks about community building. This is, again, you can probably tell, one of my favorite topics to speak about. I have a it's pretty small, started with 0 members, scaling good group on Facebook. This is just kind of my passion project where I help marketing, ethical business founders with all things marketing and growth. And this, I believe this is the link directly on my Facebook Live on community building if you guys want more resources. And yeah, here's just a few quick examples of community. This is Good Together community, about 1,500 members. This is a Brightly own group. It's more of a community for our podcast and Brightly fans. You can just see kind of random different type of posts that our community is sharing. Now we are sharing recipes easy recipes you can do at home. If you're stuck at home and don't have many ingredients, you can do this bread. They're sharing ethical tips with each other, product recommendations, very specific ones like makeup remover, or you have questions about how to talk to your friends about living more ethically and encouraging your community to live a more sustainable lifestyle without kind of guilting anyone. So this is Good Together. And this is the Mavens community. Again, there are thousands and thousands of posts there. This is the community that I've built for Globin over the last 3 years. And you can see the number of likes and comments. The bigger the community is, the higher the engagement is. Globin Mavens community started again with almost 0 followers, started with the most passionate Globin fans. And now people are sharing with each other, not just product spoilers, but also personal life updates. They're congratulating each other with birthdays, sharing personal life updates like deaths in the family, births in the family, asking for support, sending each other free gifts. So it's a true community. Another example of my favorite one is a community of Rothy's addicts. self-proclaimed addicts. As you guys know, Rothis is an ethical shoe brand, and their community, started by their own customers, is almost 20,000 addicts strong. And as you can see in our post, it's like non-Rothis related, and this is kind of how strong this community is. They're not talking about just the shoes, just Rothis shoes. They're talking about their life, because they truly feel like a community. Both in Globin case and in Rothis case, they call each other family. They treat each other as best friends. In Globin's case, we had real life meetups happening between community members, and I'm sure it must be the case for Rothis as well. Here are a few examples of Instagram. This is Brightly's Instagram. Glossier has, this is a skincare makeup brand, has really high engagement on Instagram, and they have almost 3 million followers there. And in terms of Brightly, we're also building our community of ambassadors. We call them scouts. You guys can check it out if you want. But, there's different ways to grow your community. And I just wanted to give a few examples. Hopefully I didn't run through my slides too quick. Last one is the new reality. We really were looking forward to bringing more people, Brightly Scouts, Brightly communities in real life events, in-person events. But of course, coronavirus situation changed things quite a bit. So we are hosting weekly Changemaker virtual coffee chats that anyone can join. And this is another example of a community event that we hosted yesterday for the first time, and we already had 20 participants. So again, just be genuine, authentic, and your community will follow you. I think that's all the slides I have. Yep. All right, I'm done.
Were there any questions?
No? Okay, cool.
All right. So that means I am up next. I'm actually going to put a link in the chat. And just so everyone has that, it's a resource that I'll be referencing. Okay, let me go ahead and get started. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead, and as a reminder, just put it in the chat. I'll be taking questions at the end. And I have quite a bit of content, and it can be very loaded content. So if we don't have enough time to go through any of the questions, or the question comes up later, because I know it's getting late and everyone's a little exhausted now, you can always email me, or you can message me on Instagram, or tweet your question at me. I'm happy to take them, and I'm happy to answer them at any time. So thank you for joining. I'm just going to get this chat box out of the way already. So thank you for joining, everyone. My name is Manpreet Kalra. I am a social media and brand marketing expert. My business is called Art of Citizenry. I started Art of Citizenry a few years ago. My background's in venture and tech, as you heard from the introduction at the beginning. But for those of you who joined a little later, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. I started working within the fair trade sector. Most of the clients I work with are fair trade, and I saw some familiar faces, especially one from Chicago in the chat earlier. So just want to say hi to everyone. My work is on crafting and helping brands work on your marketing strategy, but also drafting really inclusive brand narratives. That's been something I've been really pushing for over the last year, and that's been a result of the work I've been doing with fair trade brands. Part of the journey has been for me this moment of realization of how we can continue to foster conversation around diversity and inclusion in fair trade, and think about what our roles and responsibilities are as fair trade businesses, and how we can craft brand narratives in a digital era. So part of today's conversation, part of today's conversation is to first understand the global landscape that we're working in, especially when it comes to fair trade brands and the conscious consumer. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about cultural humility and brand narratives. And finally, ending our conversation today with 4 tangible questions that you can ask yourself when creating content for your fair trade brand. And just as a reminder, I put this link in the chat, but I'm also going to share it right now. If you want my deck, I kind of went a little crazy. That's what social isolation does, I suppose. And I started adding a bunch of resources, book recommendations, links to resources to help you start thinking about cultural humility, learn about new concepts, diversity and inclusion. I did a workshop right before this on diversity and inclusion. So if you put your email in there, you'll get both of my presentations along with worksheets designed to go with those presentations. So housekeeping aside, let's go ahead and dive in. So I want to start off by first talking through what the current state of affairs are globally when it comes to the conscious consumer. What we've realized is that we have this rise of a global citizenry because there's so much connectivity between us and individuals through social media, right? And as we were hearing just earlier, this idea of having this global community has become easier than ever before because of social media. And so as a result, because we're more connected, we've also seen an increase in the socially conscious consumer, what we like to call the woke global citizen. And this woke global citizen has really pushed brands to start being more transparent about how they create their products, who they're sourcing from, how they're packaging their products. You'll notice just earlier this week, Everlane started talking about how they're planning to go fully organic by 2023, I believe. And that was a whole campaign that they've started pushing forward. And what we're realizing is this is coming out of demand from consumers, right? These are consumers that are sharing with brands what they are hoping for. And what we've also seen as a result of this woke global citizen is the rise of social entrepreneurs. What we've noticed in the last 20 years is that what used to be traditionally seen as nonprofit management in business school is now actually being called social entrepreneurship. So you'll notice that nonprofit management actually does not exist at many big B schools anymore. It is social entrepreneurship that we're seeing. And the idea is, well, if I can make a profit and do good at the same time, why wouldn't I do that? And the unfortunate side effect of social entrepreneurship is something that many of us are often ignorant to, and that's this idea of the heropreneur, right? This is something that, so just full transparency, I'm originally from California. I'm from the Bay Area. I worked in venture capital. I worked in startups. So I am one of those people who would have probably and has fallen into the heropreneur trap. And so this is coming as someone from personal experience. But the idea being that I want to make a social impact. These are social issues I am passionate about, and I'm going to solve them with this idea. And what ends up happening in this mindset of being the heropreneur is that you take away the attention from the issue that's being resolved and putting that attention towards the individual who is attempting to solve the issue. And that really takes away the true impact of what what opportunities such as fair trade, social innovation, social entrepreneurship really truly have to offer. So the idea here is to stop thinking about yourself as just a social entrepreneur and stop thinking about being an individual and start thinking about the impact and what the why is around why you're doing something. And so one of the things I really like exploring here when we're talking about heropreneurship and we're talking about social entrepreneurs is the power dynamics that start playing when you have this risky mindset of being the hero of the story. So you have this, we're navigating in very new territory, right? We are navigating in a space that is only increasing in popularity. And so it's important for us to take a step back and think about what actually makes me an impactful entrepreneur. And an impactful entrepreneur is someone who is who's working on creating systemic change that lasts beyond you and your business. In the essence of how we think about fair trade. If we're thinking about the reason our fair trade business exists is to help lift people out of poverty, then that lifting out of poverty needs to happen even beyond your business. And what we often fail to recognize as fair trade brands and advocates is that these changes need to be part of a larger ecosystem. It can't just be your business alone trying to change the narrative or trying to change and make a difference in the world. So I really do encourage you to take a step back and think about what is the larger ecosystem that I'm working in. And that's fundamental to any sort of advocacy or activism that you are doing. It's knowing that why and knowing who the players are and why this problem exists to begin with. Because if you don't know why a problem exists to begin with, it's really hard to truly effectively address that problem. So let's talk a little bit about brand narratives. So brand narratives are designed to help you communicate your values, help you connect with your community, your customers, set expectations. A lot of the things that we were just talking about in the earlier presentation, those are all results of your brand narrative. Your brand narratives also help you define the voice in which you're communicating with your customers. It helps you talk about your brand cohesively and consistently across multiple platforms and mediums. The brand narrative is meant to also, at the core, help you generate sales, right? The reality is, for any social enterprise, we need to accept the fact that sales are what keep us going, right? We are currently living in a time where we're going through not just a medical, but also an economic crisis, okay? And there are countless businesses that are truly struggling right now. And what we realize is that it is, at the end of the day, their impact really does depend on the fact if they're able to stay alive as a business. And generating sales is a core part of that. So brand narratives, at the essence, help us generate our sales and move people from being just people who are passionate about our brand, but consumers of our brand and our products. So traditionally, when we've talked about brand narratives, I'm just going to keep a track on my time, but traditionally when we talk about brand narratives, we often think about the most core essence of a brand narrative. That's your value proposition, your mission statement, your values. And now we're starting to talk a little bit more about your brand story. Why do you exist? What inspires you? The story behind your name. All of those aspects play a huge role in your brand narrative. And being able to view these different aspects of your brand narrative help you really craft a cohesive story that helps you push your brand and push your mission forward. However, we live in an era that is extremely visual. So to say that your brand narrative is purely your traditional branding document is really naive. And we have to come to realize that our brand narratives are not just the copy that we craft, but also the images that we take. And I purposely chose this image because typically when I've done this presentation, I like to ask the room what they notice about this photo. And what you'll notice is these are all artisan photos, and they are all photos of people of color. And so as we start going a little deeper into my presentation, I want to give you a moment to reflect on what your brand narrative is. Because what we will often start seeing is that for most fair trade brands, your brand narrative often has undertones of savior language. And so my goal with today's presentation is really to help you address some of the issues that we see in brand narratives and help you think about ways you can create more inclusive brand narratives. So we live in a very visual space. Our Instagrams have become an extension of our website. And our websites themselves are extremely visual spaces. And everything we do, when we do presentations, right, when I'm creating a slide deck, I always try to say, okay, how much text can I take off my deck? People don't want to read the text. They want images. And this presentation in particular is really hard for me to craft with visuals because fair trade is a space where power dynamics play at every level of visual storytelling. And so I want us to step back and take the next 10 minutes to just think about how we can change that dynamic. So I want you to take this slide in as we go on to the next slide. So this slide really does yield to me this one core question that I want you to think about a little bit more. And this is really critical to fair trade and ethical sourcing and sustainability at the core, is at what point does cultural appreciation become cultural appropriation? So when we talk about our brand narratives and we talk about our mission and our values, we often like to pull aspects, and even with our names, company names, we like to pull aspects of the culture or community that we're working in. And I encourage you to step back and really critically think about at what point are you not just appreciating that culture, but actually appropriating it for your own profit. And I do realize that at the essence, a lot of brands tell me, if we don't make sales, we cannot continue supporting the communities we're working with. And I understand that, but you cannot also resort to using the communities you work with to make those sales, because that is not okay. That is not a relationship in which you're truly making the impact that you set out to make. So when it comes to how we think about our impact and how we tell our brand narrative as conscious businesses, it's important for us to think about how we approach those conversations with cultural humility. And when we're drafting our mission statement or drafting our brand story or drafting even the caption for a post, we need to step back and approach it with cultural humility. Cultural humility is a concept that's come out of public health and is actually quite relevant in fair trade as well. Cultural humility pushes us to really put our egos aside and take each individual story as a single entity and allow us to be a learner versus take our preconceived notions and impose them on a community. And so the cultural humility aspect when it comes to brand narratives, it really manifests in the way we talk about the artisans we work with and the impact of our work. If we can start changing the way we approach those two conversations, we can really start seeing the impact of our advocacy and activism as a fair trade movement and as a fair trade business change the way that we communicate impact. So I know that I'm throwing a lot of very heavy information to you, but I'm a huge advocate of also leaving you with more tangible pieces of information that you can take moving forward. So what we have to first do is acknowledge the fact that there is privilege and power dynamics at play at every level when it comes to any business or even any interaction. In fair trade, with fair trade businesses in particular, what we need to realize is that there are power dynamics at play when we are talking about the business owners and also the artisans, right? So there is a certain level of power dynamics there. There's also a certain level of privilege. And then even at the artisan level, there's a certain power dynamic at play between the artisan and the leader of that artisan group or that producer group. There are power dynamics at play both economically and often racially as well. So how do we approach those with more tangible steps? These are 4 questions that I really encourage you to ask yourself before you post your next photo on Instagram, before you start drafting your next blog post, and before you start really pushing your brand narrative and really revisiting your brand narrative with these 4 questions in mind is going to help you create more inclusion in the way that you communicate your impact. So the first question is, does my company sound like a savior? And this often comes off in the way that we talk about the results. So as a fair trade business, we're often trying to prove the work that we're doing is having an impact. And we often end up conveying this in a way that can have undertones of savior language. So it's worth taking a step back and making sure that we're addressing any of those undertones before we start sharing and disseminating information. Question 2 is, am I making blanket statements about a community or a culture? And this one in particular is important because what we often see with fair trade is that in this attempt to oversimplify the complexity of the social issue we're addressing, we tend to make blanket statements. That is not just a fair trade thing. That is a problem across the board. Nonprofits have been dealing with this for years. Okay, but in fair trade, we often end up resorting to blanket statements for the sake of simplifying. And in some ways, that can actually do more harm than good. So when you're trying to actually make an impact and change the narrative, you're actually doing more harm by creating these notions or playing into stereotypes about communities. My favorite example here is often I've seen this across the board, and I can speak to it as a woman who has whose family and ancestors are from India. I see this often because India has a huge population of fair trade artisans. One of the most common statements I see play out is, in India, women are not allowed to work. That is a very common statement that many brands make about the female artisans they employ and why the work they're doing is so impactful. And that may be the case in the community, the village that you are working with, but that is not a statement that you can make about a whole country. India is not just one village, it is a country. We see this even more magnified when we go and look at comments that are made about countries in Africa, where you will take the issues of one country and make them the issue of a whole continent. And that is also not okay. So thinking about how you make blanket statements and really being okay with getting into more details and not oversimplifying is going to help you tell a more effective and inclusive narrative. Question number 3 is, do I have permission to share the information I'm sharing? This one is so critical when it comes to artisan stories. Artisan stories, Remember that photo I shared with you earlier. So remember that mental photo I told everyone to keep in mind? So that photo, the reason I put it there is because I want you to think about how many of those individuals actually gave permission for their image to be taken and disseminated across various social channels by various organizations, by various activism movements, right? There is a difference between allowing you to take a photo and informed consent. We need to be thoughtful about how we conceive and take consent into mind. And really, oftentimes with artisan stories in particular, we will notice that there's a lot of personal information that is shared about the artisan, and I'm going to share an example right after this. And I want you to think, how would I feel if this information was shared about me? And finally, with question 4 is, am I promoting cultural hegemony? And cultural hegemony is essentially this layer of dominance where I know what's right. I know how this community should operate. I know the issues that you're facing. I can tell you how to do it better. And there's this level that we often don't realize that we're conveying that we need to be more thoughtful about and cognizant of when we're talking about the communities we're working with and the impact of our brand. So I'm going to lead up and in 2 examples, and I want you to take a moment to read the example to yourself and then ask yourself the 4 questions on the screen. If you can't see the example right now, you will get my slide deck so you can go through this activity on your own as well. But for the sensitivity, I have blocked out the name of the company and the founder. But essentially, this statement says, our founder, blank, is in Ethiopia and Kenya, visiting the communities where your purchases have brought flourishing to families. It's profound what happens when women stand together. From blah, 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 your purchases create opportunities for 1,700 women in the USA and thousands more in communities around the world that need it most. Follow, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm actually going to ask one of my co-presenters to walk through this activity with me. Anyone up for it? Someone want to get off mute and walk through the activity with me?
I can do it.
Yay! Okay. So what do you think about this caption? Which questions do you think apply to the caption that I just read out loud? And then also think about the image.
I mean, yeah, I think the image, we've seen so many images like that. And I mean, quite honestly, like I can speak for myself. When I traveled to Indian Africa, like something similar was like, obviously, I'm a white person traveling there. Yeah. But yeah, I was also thinking, if I can have a quick example, when we did we called a program called Artisan Fund, I always made sure to talk about it. We do not know what artisans need. We do not know what this community is. This community is the one who tells us how we can help. Exactly. So just my thought there. So you're asking what is the main...
What questions do you think apply to this example?
Definitely, probably they don't have a permission from every single person in the photo.
Permission for sure. I feel that there's undertones of savior language with the idea of, your purchases have brought flourishing to families. That to me is saying that you are saving these families, right? That's what it's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we're just providing them jobs, just like someone providing jobs to us. This is how I like to talk about that. Yeah.
And then tell me what you think about question 4. So I think that question 4 really applies when it comes to the image in particular. There's a certain level of dominance that we see, right? There's the visual of the hovering over, the single white person in a sea of people of color, right? There's that layer where we start seeing a certain level of cultural hegemony playing out and dominance. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also a little bit difficult almost to avoid it when you're traveling, but like something you want to do when you're taking photo with the artisan is, let's all look at the camera, let's stare, let's, take pictures together and as, kind of equal human beings, and just trying to go ahead.
Yeah. And I think to your point, is that I was doing this presentation with another group earlier last month. And one of the points that we discussed during that conversation was that when you take images, there's some images that you take that are for personal use. Yeah. And then there's some images that you can share that are more public, and being okay with saying not every photo I take of me with the community needs to be for social media is a checkpoint that we need to have. That is our responsibility as business owners or as advocates of fair trade, that not every image we take of us visiting communities is for our social or is for disseminating to our customers. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. This one is, this one's much longer, and I know we're getting a little short on time. I don't want to keep the others from having their full time, but I'm going to walk you through why I kept this example, and please make sure you revisit the deck to go through it yourself. But I share this example because this is a perfect example of how a typical artisan story is written out. And this is where the question of how would I feel if this information was shared about me and my personal life, right? Certain words here is she felt disempowered in her home and was denied the opportunity to make decisions of her own life. It wasn't until she started working with our organization that her life and sense of self-worth began to change. That paragraph in itself is so loaded and can fall into all four of those questions, right? There is a certain level of dominance. There is a certain level of savior language. There are blanket statements that are being made. And I don't know if permission was taken, but even if permission was given, there's a difference between informed consent and just consent to take your photo and document your story. So I want to end my presentation with a few things and action items that you can start doing to change the narrative. That's the big thing here that I want you to think about, is first recognize the fact that your relationship with the artisans you work with is mutually beneficial. Without them, you would have no business. Your business wouldn't exist. And really, if you start thinking about how you can start changing the way you communicate your impact visually, increase representation. Representation and diversity isn't just about having artisans who you work with. Diversity means having representation of the people that you are working with at every layer of your business's ecosystem. It should be on your executive team. They should be represented throughout your business, and they should be represented as models for your business. We often notice it's not rare for us to see with fair trade businesses in particular that the images that we see of people of color are often just of artisans, and the models are not usually people of color or minorities. So improve representation. If those are the communities that you are leveraging to create your products, then those are the communities that you should be also celebrating through your stories and through your narrative. And finally, really reconsider the language you use and how you convey impact. Empower is one word that most fair trade brands love using. I highly encourage you to think before using it, because you're not empowering anyone, they are empowering themselves. So with that, I know that we're a little low on time. Are there any questions?
There is one question.
Awesome.
From Jasmine French.
Awesome.
How do you tell the stories of people of color without cultural appropriation?
You include them in the story. You actually include them in the dialogue. You're not telling their story. Let them tell their story themselves. All right. Is that it? All right. Well, here are all the ways that you can get in touch with me. Again, slide deck, additional resources. If questions start popping up, feel free to message me on Twitter or on Instagram, or you can also email me. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
Let me get my ducks in a row here, and I will share mine. All right, can folks see this? Great, cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Godfrey from NationBuilder. My colleague Sarah McCord and I are going to be presenting to you, joining you from Los Angeles, where we just got a shelter-in-place order handed down. It's a crazy time, so I apologize for the lighting in my home environment. It's not necessarily the most ideal for presenting, but really excited to be chatting with you today. And I'll let Sarah introduce herself as well.
Hi, everybody. Well, I think Isabel introduced us earlier, but yes, I am a colleague of Jay's here in Los Angeles, and feels nice to be with all of you right now, actually, when we're getting the news that we have to stay at home more than we've been doing. So excited to share with you about NationBuilder and activism in general.
Cool. So we had hoped to get into a little more of a hands-on exercise in the software. Obviously, the format precludes that a little bit. So what we're going to do instead is talk to you high level about how we think about leadership with software and what leading with technology means. And then Sarah is going to actually get into some of the specifics of how we put that into practice with our software. So let's dive into it. So we're NationBuilder. We describe ourselves out in the world as a leadership software company. And our motto, if you went on our website, you would see this front and center, is build the future. The concept here is not that we are building the future. It's providing the tools and the means for folks who need to make change in the world to do the thing that they were meant to do. I think we probably have a lot of folks here in the audience who would identify as campaigners, who would identify as organizers. Regardless of whether or not you think of yourself as a leader, you are. Leadership for us is about people who want to do something in the world to make change and who need other people to do it. Organizing is just another word for a form of leadership, and we exist to facilitate that. So the big change that I think we're responding to in the world is that the internet, social media, it's almost a cliche at this point to say that they've changed everything, but it's true. And one of the major ways in which they have is that prior to the advent of social media, the means of disseminating information quickly, the means of communicating with a large number of people quickly and mobilizing them was almost exclusively, except for through extraordinarily hard work, reserved for people in positions of authority, the experts, the elected officials, the traditional power centers. The amazing thing about social media and about the internet is that it's done two things simultaneously. One, it's opened up the opportunity for anyone who has a compelling message, who has values that resonate with people, to be able to quickly garner an audience and organize folks around a cause. But the second thing that it's done is it's also led people to realize that they can actually seek those people out. They can look for people who inspire confidence in them, whose values they share, who they trust. And rather than just listening to what they're told by the traditional authority figures, they can actually do something to help amplify the message and support the cause of the folks whose work they care about. So we say this as influence doesn't come from authority anymore. It comes from trust. It's about building communities that trust you. So that's irreversibly rooted in the story of our founder, Jim Gilliam. He passed away about a year ago. And this is very much from his personal experience, because Jim was a 2-time cancer survivor, political activist, documentarian, who found himself a little over 10 years ago in a situation where the chemotherapy from his 2 cancer survivals scarred his lungs to the point that he needed a double lung transplant to survive. He applied to medical centers all around the country. UCLA is sort of renowned as the one that is the best at this kind of surgery. And it was local for him. So they were the one he was particularly invested in, and everyone turned him down as a high-risk patient. And then a really cool thing happened. A lot of people loved Jim. A lot of people cared about him. And those people self-organized online to mount a pressure campaign to get UCLA Medical Center to take another look at his case. It ended up working. The department had ultimately reviewed the case personally and said, this never reached my desk in the first place. I'm willing to take a risk on this. They performed the surgery. Jim ended up living another 10 years after that. And he came out of that experience so clear about a few things. One of those was, I probably don't have that much longer in this world. And the thing that I have to leave behind is giving other people the best chance of being able to have the experience that I had, of being able to rally other people around something important. So he initially thought that might be a nonprofit. It might be something that he would do open source because, among other things, he had a long background in engineering. And he finally came to the realization that actually the only way he could do that was to start a company to build that as software. And so he had a few principles that were really important to him. There are product principles, but we also believe that they are the principles that are important for technology that successfully supports the work of leaders around the world. Those are: own your own data, put people at the center, move people to action, and distribute leadership. We'll talk a little bit about what each of those means, but those are the tenets that have driven both our software development and also the way we have tried to show up in the world and for the organizations that we work with. Currently, that's thousands of nonprofits, political campaigns, movements, but also actually businesses, sometimes just people who are putting together something really simple at their school. It's organizations of a variety of sizes and shapes. And the thing they have in common is they want to do something that is important to them, and they need other people to do it. So the first principle here is own your own data. What I mean by that is owning your history as an organization. Data has taken on kind of this negative connotation for a lot of folks, I think. And what we're not talking about here is harvesting information from people in some like sinister way, the way you've heard about with Cambridge Analytica and a lot of the social platforms out there. What we're actually talking about is the most important kind of data, which is what your supporters, what the people who are in your movement tell you themselves. Sometimes they tell you that through the actions they take. Sometimes they tell you that by expressing a personal preference. But the point is, it's what's shared freely with you because these people trust you. That is an important dynamic both for the organization and for the individual. So for us, the way that manifests is organizations have to control that history, which means one of our core principles is we don't own people's data. We don't believe in owning people's data. We don't believe in taking it and using it for other purposes or sharing it. People have the right to take it with them, and it's theirs, and they use it how they choose, and they use it how they please. For individuals, it's about making sure that you're being thoughtful about what you're doing with the data they share with your organization. So that's giving folks the right to tell you how they want to be communicated with, how they want their data to be used. In examples in Europe, and in California under the CCPA, and I think this will become a more widespread thing. Another thing that we've been really aggressive about supporting is folks having the ability to contact organizations and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with you having my data anymore, or I want to get an understanding of what has been done with my personal data. That's more and more important with each passing year. So the next principle here is put people at the center. What I mean by that is there are a lot of software solutions out there in the world that do specific things very well, and a lot of good tools for tasks. But when you're talking about mobilizing people, you actually have to think about it differently, because the thing you want to privilege is not the specific task. It is the relationship with the person and being thoughtful about the whole history of your engagement with them. So for us, we have kind of 4 pillars, because we're talking about technology here, but these 4 pillars are representative of different kinds of engagement. For us, that's your website, how people interact with your web presence. It's your database, which maybe is the history of both like online and offline engagement with folks. Also being able, in a user-friendly way, to be able to actually like quickly understand somebody's history with you. Donations, a lot of organizations that are looking to make change out in the world need to raise money. That history is very important, and it's important to understand it commingled with everything else. And then communications. How are people responding to your communication, but also how do you communicate with them in a thoughtful way? No one person will interact with an organization or a campaign in the same exact way. It'll be a sequence of things that are representative of what's important to them. And it's actually your responsibility and your relationship with them to meet them where they are in that relationship with you. So Sarah is going to take us through a representative example here in the software.
Yeah, so what putting people at the center really looks like practically in software technology, specifically in NationBuilder, is represented here. So in kind of the upper left corner, you see my profile in, let's say, a NationBuilder database, and it represents all the different ways that I've interacted with this organization in one single place. Instead of, my emails living over here and a volunteer list living here, and there's 5 different Sarah McCords on 5 different lists. When you put your people at the center and the data all around them, you get one profile with everything that you see about me. You see I've donated at the top. You see I've raised money. I've got tags that are applied that are used for segmentation. I've got my social media handles in there. And then obviously normal contact information that maybe I've given to the organization, phone number, email, that kind of stuff. And then a little bit down further to the right there, you get another kind of snapshot of, again, the big picture of how myself as a supporter kind of stacks up and is represented within the organization. I've opted in, I'm volunteering, and again, my total donations and the money I've raised. So like just looking at this one single view, you get a really holistic view of who I am as a supporter and how I've interacted with the organization. So that's like kind of how we visualize putting people at the center.
All right, let's keep going. So the next thing in our product principles is move people to action. So a lot of organizations have a bad habit of thinking of people in different lanes. So, oh, this person is a donor. Oh, this person is a volunteer. Oh, this person's on our email list. And because different people own those functions in the organization, they see that thing as the endpoint. Like whatever that lane is, that's what you are trying to get that person to do. The thing that we propose is that actually it's the wrong way to think about people. People aren't just potential contributors or supporters within your movement. They are actually potential leaders. And the folks here who are campaigners, you're leaders, but you actually, like, as part of leading, have a responsibility to cultivate and encourage and create the space for leadership among the people whom you recruit, among the people whom you train, among the people whom you work with. That's the best of all possible worlds, because it builds a capacity that isn't dependent on one person, and it builds shared ownership in the work. So the way we think about this is through ladders of engagement. You might have someone start out as a really passive participant in your organization. Maybe they're just signing up to hear from you. They come to an event, they're sort of cautiously tiptoeing in, but your goal is to build the kind of relationship with them where they'll be inspired to do more, where ultimately they might end up being an advocate for you who recruits other people, where they might actually be a leader who's responsible for organizing folks themselves. So that can happen in a lot of ways. Some of that is human and some of it is technological. One of the most basic things that you can do if you are spinning up a web presence is actually be thoughtful about what you want people to do. Don't just put content out there. What you want to do is inspire people to do a little bit more than they set out to do in the first place. So for us, that manifests in something really simple, which is chaining things together. And a representative example of that might be somebody comes and they sign a petition on a website. Cool, great. You could just drop a thank you note there and then have somebody follow up with them later. Or you could set that up so that you're kicking them over to a calendar of events that are coming up in their area. So maybe they can come and participate in person. Maybe when they RSVP for that event, great, you kick them over to a page where you ask them to contribute a little bit of money. You don't leave the opportunity to get people to do a little bit more on the table in your first touch with them, which in some cases will be your web presence. You also communicate thoughtfully with them to move them up the ladder of engagement. So targeting your outreach to folks in a way that actually is informed by their history with you is so important. I can't tell you how crazy it drives me when I talk to organizations who are doing big things out in the world and then hear them just talk about their email list as though that is one thing. It's irresponsible to just communicate with people as though they are one size fits all. They care about different things. They want different things. They've done different things. You have to know that history and you have to use that history to inform the asks that you make of them, because that's you reciprocating. That's you actually showing like, yes, no, what you've done matters. And we understand that your contribution is not the same as everybody else's. And we appreciate you. Sarah, you want to take them through this?
Sure. So going back to the product principle or the organizing principle of moving people to action and the ladder of engagement. So that shows up in a concept in the platform called paths, which here we have a path of basically becoming a chapter leader. You know that if somebody, maybe there's somebody in your organization that either has signed up to become a chapter leader or is interested, or someone you're like, I know that person can be a leader. They don't just become a leader, right? There's steps that have to happen along the way and things that both you and them need to do and things that need to be organized. So paths can be used to help kind of facilitate that process. So you see this path here that Jay has created, kind of shepherd somebody through the steps of starting from interested and then doing all the steps within the organization that you need to do to actually become a leader and launch the chapter. And you can kind of get a holistic visual view of all the people that are on that journey with your organization. And we like to think of paths as both like macro and micro. So you can be on, many different journeys, as Jay is talking about, at the same time, right? You could be on a path to become a donor at the same time as like a path that's just, becoming a chapter leader. And then here, this is kind of going back to communicating thoughtfully, right? So as Jay was talking about, you don't just have one single communication strategy. People want to hear from you about different things and in different ways. And so the whole idea of having all of your data around your supporters in one place is you can then utilize that data to filter and find specific groups of individuals to communicate with them in a way that makes sense, right? So here in this example in the upper left, this is actually using a filter within NationBuilder where we've decided to look for all the people that attended a specific event. In this case, it's the Fair Trades Campaign National Conference. and that also signed 3 petitions. So those are like semi-engaged people, right? They showed up to our event, they're signing petitions, but they haven't recruited anybody. So they've done kind of 2 semi-engaged things. They haven't recruited anybody. So we're going to filter for those people, save it as a filter. And then in the second screenshot you see over here, we can send an email to just that set of individuals, something really specific. That's like, thank you so much for your engagement. We can see you're really excited. And this is the next specific ask we're asking of you, right? Like, you're probably going to get a much better response and more likely for these people to actually recruit people and to do the next thing you want to do than if you're just sending to your entire list an email asking them to recruit 3 followers, because you've got some super engaged people and some not.
All right. So the final principle here is distribute leadership. And what we mean by that is organizing. This is probably more familiar to this group than most. But the core concept here, right, is building capacity by prioritizing getting the units of your group small enough and close enough to the individuals involved that everyone knows each other. You don't want to be so big that there is no one at your organization, whether it's a volunteer leader, whether it's staff, whether it's whoever, who is the face of the organization and knows every person personally. A lot of people call this the snowflake model. It's obviously like comes from political campaigning, but it is far more universal than that. So the way we think about this is that your supporters are the single best resource you have to grow your capacity, and the most enthusiastic leaders who emerge amongst your supporters should be responsible for organizing other people. They should be responsible for training other folks. They should be responsible for being ambassadors for the work. At its most basic, everybody should have a point person. Every single person who gets involved should have someone that they know and that they are building a relationship with, who is the face of the organization to them. And better yet, you should equip folks to self-identify as leaders by organizing on your behalf, even before you've asked them to. If you put it out there, you'll be pleasantly surprised at the people who will take that up. And sometimes that's as simple as letting people organize events on their own, making it simple for folks to recruit on your behalf, fundraise on your behalf. You'll learn a lot about the people who are really invested in your cause based on who steps up and takes action. And Sarah is going to talk about how we do that in practice.
Yeah, 2 ways that distributing leadership shows up in the product. So this red box is not over the right part of the screenshot. It's over the voter ID on Ryan's profile, which is not the correct thing, but that's okay. It's supposed to be over the part where it says point person. So Jay referenced point person. Every supporter that comes into your organization should be assigned a point person. That means somebody who is responsible for, shepherding them through their journey in the organization. And what distributing leadership means is that doesn't have to be, a full-time member of your organization, right? It can be a volunteer, it can be a staffer. And within NationBuilder, as you see on the right, we have custom permission sets to where you can assign a set of supporters to a point person. Maybe that's me, or in this instance, it's a Jay, and he's a volunteer, and allow Jay only visibility into your database for those people that are assigned to him. So he can log in, he can make the calls to those 5 new people that signed up as the volunteer, and he's done something meaningful for your organization as a volunteer with a little bit of access, but a lot of ownership over what his role is within that organization. And then kind of the second piece here that Jay talked about, another great way to distribute leadership is events. So user submitted events is a feature within the event management part of NationBuilder, which is having that button on your website. If, there are events you are having on your website, but people don't see some in their area, maybe they want to host a watch party of something, or like a meetup or something, just being able to have that button. If people use it, great. If they don't, great. But if they use it, that they're primed, right, to become a leader, and they want to do an event in their area. And that's just like a signal that they're raising their hand to get more involved in the organization.
And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to blitz through this a little more quickly than I otherwise might. But want to highlight some examples of folks who have done this exceptionally well to give you a sense of the breadth of possibility here. You may be familiar with this guy. He got a bit of traction recently, but you probably heard of Yang gangs and this whole concept of organizing folks into little communities supporting Andrew Yang's candidacy that really caused his campaign to take off in a way nobody expected. Fun fact, NationBuilder was the engine for that. And it worked in exactly the way we just described. They turned folks loose to self-organize and were shocked at the number of people who, in very short order, self-identified as potential leaders within the campaign. The capacity that they were able to build with basically no money to spend on doing it early on was crucial to his actually getting the momentum that he got in the campaign. Another really cool example here, volunteercleanup.org. This is a couple in Miami who took on the task just personally themselves of cleaning up beaches in their area and came to the realization that they weren't actually making a real impact by doing it themselves. So they decided they needed to go bigger with it. They booted up volunteercleanup.org as basically a clearinghouse for folks organizing cleanup events in Miami-Dade County. And you can see the numbers on here. This is over a 3-year period. Over 1,200 cleanups were organized on their site. Over 100,000 volunteer events were put in. Volunteer hours were put in. All of this stemming just from the idea and the passion of one couple who really cared about keeping the beaches clean, putting this into practice. And then finally, this is one that's ongoing in Italy right now. Italia Viva is a movement that's booted up to recruit a former prime minister who had basically exited politics to get back into the game. And it's made up of citizens committees. It's actually very similar to how the Yang Gang worked. Folks self-organizing because they feel like his message resonates with them. They actually, like, it's essentially morphed into a movement to draft him back into running for prime minister again. That has since been successful. He's formally joined the movement, but you can see over 1,000 committees, over 58,000 petition signatures gathered in 10 days. It's pretty incredible traction for a movement that was built from the ground up with people self-organizing. So again, I'll close with a reminder of the 4 principles here. Own your own data, put people at the center, move people to action, and distribute leadership. You have to be able to do those things to organize and to lead effectively. And software is an important part of that, but it is only part of it. At the end of the day, it's also about mindset. It's about the passion and the orientation that you bring to the work. Software is just a tool to help facilitate that. And it can be a really useful tool, but the person using it matters a lot. I'd love to take any questions that have come up.
I answered one question in the chat from apparently a 4-year NationBuilder user about some resources on our website. But yeah, if there's any other ones, we would love to hear them.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
All right. I know that we have some fair trade enterprise owners, but we also have students and like individuals. What are some ways individuals could leverage tools like NationBuilder?
Yeah. My perspective on it is that it's actually not any different, except you have to be realistic about your capacity early on and be thoughtful about what you prioritize. Whereas a large organization might have a really built out apparatus with like layers and layers and layers of point people and a really sophisticated website with like a beautiful design. If you're a student and you're trying to get something done, the way you do it with NationBuilder is you spin up an account, you set up a website with a public template, so you don't have to do all the design work and you can just configure the things you want to configure. And then identify the people who you think are most likely to be able to help get the word out about what you're doing, and start with them. Any other questions?
We did have one question from a bit earlier from Eldana Fernandez. I'm not sure if that was for Manpreet, UJ, Sarah, or Lisa. It's for virtual chats, do you do it on Zoom or just Facebook Live?
Yeah, I think it was probably for me. So the coffee chat that I've mentioned, it's actually on Zoom, and I'm definitely more experienced with Facebook Lives. I've been doing them for probably 3-4 years now. But the reason why I realized with Facebook Lives, especially like last Sunday, I just wanted to have like a hangout with our Facebook group members, like a virtual hangout. But Facebook Live is not really ideal for that, or even Instagram Live, because again, you're talking at people. It's good if you have like a kind of QVC kind of type of model, you're showing products or you're presenting something. So I'm using at Scaling Good if I have something to teach my members on specific marketing topics. That works well, and I can just read their comments live, or I can interview an expert. I think at most, if you can try actually using your Zoom and live stream on Facebook Live, but again, it will be 2 people. But why I like Zoom for, especially in this, in this coronavirus reality, we want to connect with each other. So I really like the fact that we, like, just like now, we can all see each other and we can all talk with each other. Anything else, or we're good?
Bill Bennett just mentioned that with Zoom, you can break into small groups. I think that's all of our time. But thank you very much to all of our presenters. Thank you for all of our viewers for tuning in. And we are excited to virtually see you around the next few days.